Welcome back. All right, so another redraft today, and this is one that I'm filling up a spot where I should have already done this draft. 89 is stacked when it comes to the star players, and obviously I'm only going to go 1 through 21 because there were only 21 teams in the league at the time. Toronto had multiple first round picks. New Jersey had multiple first round picks. And in fact, Toronto had 3. They took Scott Thornton, Rob Pearson, and Steve Bancroft. When you see how stacked this draft is, yeah. And that's despite Scott Thornton had a decent career in the NHL. Rob Pearson played for a while. Bancroft not as much. But when you look at how stacked this draft is, yeah. So we'll talk about it. That being said, 1 through 21. I can't believe I haven't done this before, and you guys will see why. Right at number 1. So moving up from number 53. Nicholas Lidstrom. Nicholas Lidstrom drafted 53rd overall by Detroit. And within a couple of years, we knew just what an absolute steal that was for the Detroit Red Wings. And of course, Lidstrom goes on to have one of the best careers any defenseman's ever had. And if the Nordiques had drafted him first overall, and I'm saying this despite Sundin having a really good career, but what could Lidstrom have done for that blue line? And then eventually in Colorado as well, because I don't think anything was going to stop the Nordiques from moving. But anyways, at number 2, moving up from number 74. So originally, Dave Chizowski is drafted by the Islanders. And with 21, it's easy for me to put the names on the board of who got drafted originally and then put in the new names. With the 30 team plus drafts, it's a little bit harder to read everything. So in this case, Sergei Fedorov goes to the New York Islanders. I think he's an upgrade from Chizowski. Chizowski, though, did play for a while in the NHL, so you guys can decide whether Fedorov would have been an upgrade from Chizowski, but you can tell Detroit had themselves a draft because, again, Fedorov was 74th. Lidstrom was 53rd. One of the reasons Fedorov would have been 74th is the expectation he probably wouldn't have been coming over. I mean, it's 89, right? So this is before we had like this influx of young Russian talent. So GMs weren't as likely to draft them. At number 3, going to Toronto, which is kind of odd because he does end up playing for Toronto, and that's Matt Sundin. So Sundin drops from 1 to 3, not because he's a bad draft pick at 1, but because this draft is ridiculous. Sundin went on to have a very good Hall of Fame career, so that's 3 Hall of Famers in this draft. And so, yeah, Sundin, I won't say anything negative about him. Every now and then I'll see posts like, hey, he was the worst captain the Leafs have ever had. What? I can think of 2 or 3 just off the top of my head, but there are people who will talk like that. Number 4 on the list is not going to be Stu Barnes. I like Stu Barnes. However, at number 4, moving up from number 113, Pavel Bure. When the Vancouver Canucks drafted Pavel Bure, there was an uproar that there were those GMs who didn't think he was eligible. Basically, if it had been known Bure was eligible to be drafted, there's no way he lasts till number 113. So the Canucks get away with one here. And instead, Bure in this redraft ends up going to the Jets. Bure would have been 3rd if he'd had a longer career and, got to 500 goals and everything. But the shorter career, I give Matt Sundin the edge on Pavel Bure. But he was one of the best goal scorers in the history of the game. And that's 4 Hall of Famers on the board so far. At number 5, and originally number 5 in this draft. So why change it? Bill Guerin. Bill Guerin, excellent career. He's now, of course, the general manager of the Minnesota Wild. But, yeah, I remember him being a pretty good player and liking him wherever he played. And there's 5 excellent players so far in this draft. This draft's insane. Again, I just went into like Hockey Reference and looked it up and like, this was a pretty good draft, wasn't it? Holy crow, this was a great draft. So, number 6, moving up from number 10. So, Chicago originally drafted Adam Bennett. If you're saying who? Yep. So, number 6, Bobby Holik. Holik goes to Chicago instead of lasting until Hartford. And of course, Holik would play his best seasons in New Jersey. Then he would get signed for big money by the Rangers, and it didn't quite work out for him with the Rangers as it had with the Devils. But Holik was an excellent forward, both ends of the ice, as I remember it. Pretty good goal scorer at points as well. So, yeah, Holik at number 6. Number 7. Goaltender goes to Minnesota. Not Doug Schmolik in this. Doug Schmolik, a defenseman. I'm trying to remember if Schmolik got into more than a handful of games at the NHL level. But we're going with the goalie, Olaf Kolzig. Kolzig, it took a while for him with Washington. By the time that he gets into that season where he's finally the starter in Washington, there was some debate about whether or not he was ever actually going to become a good starter. And then all that debate goes away when he became what Ole the goalie was. Absolutely fantastic goaltender. At his peak, he was one of the absolute best in the game. And so he goes number 7 in this draft. Number 8. Originally drafted 70th. And a bit of an upgrade for the Canucks on Jason Herter. No offense to Jason Herter, of course. But Robert Reichel would have been a pretty good pick right there. Reichel had a very good career. Solid top 6 forward. Drafted originally by the Flames at 70th. Again, European players tended to slide a bit. You know, if we'd had current rules and current scouting standards, there's no way that these guys who are stolen mid to late rounds, that would have happened. It is definitely changed from where it was. We still see some steals later in the draft, but not nearly as many as we used to, because you generally have everybody scouting the globe, and with all the video that there is on players now, it's harder to keep a person a secret. Number 9. Very good player. Now we're dropping into the very good players who had good, solid careers. And so Donald Audette, who was originally drafted 183rd in this draft, goes 9th to St. Louis. So a bit of an upgrade for Donald Audette. They draft him instead of Jason Marshall. So one thing that stands out with this draft is that there were a lot of first-round draft picks that didn't quite pan out. I think that's why I haven't done this draft. I think I've looked through drafts and I've seen the first round and gone, a few guys there, but I don't know if that's an interesting draft. But definitely a lot of steals outside of the first round. This is why I, kind of scratch my head at some of the draft picks that get traded where teams will just throw them away. But I don't think it's as potentially dire as it was back then, because again, scouting's a lot better now. Number 10, and dropping from 4, Stu Barnes. Good career, good defensive forward who had some good offensive seasons as well, and one of my favorite players when he was playing, because again, when a player has a good long career and they seem to be getting better as they get older, that's a player that I'm going to like, and especially if they have a good work ethic, and Barnes always had that. Probably how he ended up being drafted 4th that year is work ethic and the skill as well. So Barnes being in the top 10, again, I like Barnes a lot. At 11, and originally number 11 too. So it looks like Detroit got this pick right, and that's Mike Sillinger. The one question I would have is, so we look at Fedorov and Lidstrom and say, what a steal. But then why draft Sillinger in the first round if you're certain that Fedorov and Lidstrom are going to be a big deal? So at this time, Detroit's overseas scouting was ahead of most other teams. So I'm understanding that part of it. But there's still some risk in taking your picks like Lidstrom and Fedorov later. Definitely risk there in drafting Sillinger. And again, Sillinger had a good career, but it is one of those questions I've had where this team gets a big steal in the 8th or 9th round. And again, back then there were 9. I think it was actually 10 rounds at this point. But then why didn't they take him earlier if they knew how good he was? Number 12. Moving up from number 196. And originally drafted by the Minnesota North Stars. Artur Serbe ends up moving to San Jose in the dispersal draft from Minnesota. It was kind of a complicated, convoluted thing when San Jose came into the league. And they take players from Minnesota because it's like a Cleveland Barons thing. It's this whole mess. But Artur Serbe added to Matt Sundin for Toronto. I'll go ahead and go out on a limb and say that's an upgrade from Thornton and Pearson. I'm willing to go out on that limb. And that's 2 goaltenders who are now in the first round of this draft. And again, Urbe, really good goaltender. One of my favorites. I was so mad when Vancouver decided not to keep Urbe. And word at the time was it was because he was short. And they didn't want a short of stature goaltender, which, I mean, now that's standard. But still, there are teams that I think make the mistake of passing on guys like Wolf in Calgary, for example. But anyways, number 13 on the board is going to be, moving up from number 22. And instead of Lindsay Vallis being drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, they draft Adam Foote. Foote's had his number retired, of course, by the Avalanche. Foote was a very good defensive defenseman, big punishing defensive defenseman, never a flashy scorer or close to it, but the defense was so good, and he was so good for so long that he's number 13 on this board. And some of the redrafts that I've been doing, Foote could have been in the top 4 or top 5, especially 99. He might have been in the top 4 or top 5 of that. So, again, 89, kind of stacked. Number 14 on the list, another good defenseman, moving up from number 191. Nope, that's not an A, it's an E, it's an I. See, I hear Vladimir, and I want to put an A in that second here too, but it's Vladimir Malakhov. Or, if you watch the French broadcast when he played for the Montreal Canadiens, Malahov, which I thought sounded better. I was like, you know what? Malahov sounds better. So, Vladimir Malahov gets drafted by the Buffalo Sabres instead of Kevin Haller. Kevin Haller could play in the NHL. Sure, he did. But Malahov, better. It does sound better. Vladimir Malakhov. At any rate, Malakhov, very good defenseman, top 4 guy. Got himself a really expensive contract, as I remember it, at one point. And he's one of those guys. He gets a really big contract, but gets it as a veteran, which means you've got it when you've already done all your best playing. So the only place to go from there is down. It's a mistake that GMs made a lot back then. Now, the mistake, I don't even know if it's a mistake, but the risk now is that you're paying all that money to your young players, and sometimes they don't pan out. Number 15 was Jason Souls for the Edmonton Oilers, so nope. Instead, moving up from number 116, Dallas Drake. Could play top 6 minutes at points. Yep, play on the third line. Sure. Dallas Drake had a solid career in the National Hockey League, and so he ends up at number 15. I think he played over 1,000 games. There are a lot of players from this draft class that played a lot of games in the NHL, Drake being one of them. And so, yeah, he's 15th on the list, goes to the Edmonton Oilers. Number 16, now is Jamie Heward that went to Pittsburgh at 16. In the redraft here, Patrice Brisebois. Now, there is a subscriber to this channel who is a Montreal fan who is older than I am, who may not think Patrice Brisebois was a good defenseman, because there were a lot of Montreal fans that booed him a lot. I know Brisebois is the nickname he got as a defenseman. Now, I'm not saying Brisebois was fantastic, but I always thought the criticism was a little bit over the top. And when Brisebois left Montreal, I thought he played better. I never understood Montreal fans turning against their own the way they did. They don't do that now. Not like then. I kind of thought it was like really aggressive. Like it borderlined on hate, it seemed, for Brisebois. So yeah, Brisebois I thought had a really good career. I thought he was a decent top 4 defenseman. Were there defensive shortcomings? Sure. But no defenseman is perfect. I really think it is, you get spoiled with guys like Larry Robertson and Larry Robinson and Eric Desjardins. I should have just left it Larry Robertson. And then with Larry Robertson, where do I find the unsubscribe button? Number 17. I've done a lot of videos this week. Number 62 originally, moving up to 17. And instead of Shane Stevenson, Chris Draper. So Chris Draper, originally drafted by the Jets, he was acquired by Detroit for $1. and went on to make Winnipeg regret getting that dollar. Draper was a fantastic bottom six forward for the Detroit Red Wings, a huge part of that team. And so Draper on the Bruins, I would have been quite happy to see him play in Boston instead of Detroit, just saying personally. Number 18 originally by New Jersey was Jason Miller, so they got it right with Guerin. Miller was less right than Guerin. And instead, moving up from 23, so not far off from where he was originally drafted, Travis Green. Travis Green, now a coach in the NHL, of course, but he was a pretty good player. He was a good player, not a great player, not a superstar or anything, but he's a good player. And so I think Green at 18, I think that's perfectly good. New Jersey gets Guerin and Green in this redraft. So again, probably an upgrade from Jason Miller. Yeah, probably. Originally drafted at 19th, Olaf Kolzig. And so Washington's not getting Kolzig because he goes 7th. Instead, well, it's still a goaltender. And honestly, this is interesting because he did play for the Capitals. Byron Dafoe. There have been times in Washington's franchise history where they've been creating goaltenders. When Holtby came up, that's one of those periods where it just felt like the Caps just had goalie after goalie after goalie coming in. And early 90s, they had that as well. Byron Dafoe ends up being a Caps goalie. Kolzig's a Capitals goalie. There were a bunch of them. But, yeah, Dafoe at 19. I like Dafoe. I've mentioned Dafoe in a recent video, too. I have no idea if it's gone live on the channel yet. I would think by the time this is posted, yes. But I love the masks. You want to look up masks for NHL goalies. Byron Dafoe's were among the most creative and was really classy. They were nice. Lord Byron masks. Number 20 to the New York Rangers. Originally, they draft Stephen Rice. In this redraft, moving up from 45th, Rob Zamner. So Zamner, mostly bottom six in his career. Might have been on second line at certain points. But Zamner played for a nice long time. Solid career for him. And I think Zamner at 20 makes sense. Which brings us to 30 or 30. See, I'm used to doing 30-man redrafts. Dropping from 3 to 21. So Steve Bancroft does not go in the first round. Scott Thornton for Toronto ends up going 21st. So Toronto comes out of this with Sundin, Urbe, and Johnson. Now, first rounders that I did not redraft. Chizowski for the Islanders right here. So Chizowski, I'll check him off. Adam Bennett, Doug Smolik, Jason Herter, Jason Marshall, Rob Pearson, Lindsey Vallis, Kevin Haller, Jason Souls, Jamie Heward, Shane Stevenson, Jason Miller, Stephen Rice, and Steve Bancroft. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, scouting is better now. I think this is one of those drafts that shows you how scouting, I think, is better now than what it was. Or this is just one of those drafts where the guys that looked really good in their draft year, it just didn't pan out. So there you go. The 1989 entry draft. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again